Hey guys, this is Coach Sean with Blackwells Baseball, and today we have a special guest. I am very excited about it because I think that I can learn a lot from him, and I think you guys will as well. So today we have Deven Morgan. How you doing, Deven?
I'm good, brother. How are you?
I'm good. So you are the head of youth training with Driveline, is that correct?
In a technical sense, I am the director of youth baseball, but I mean, effectively, yeah. I started our department. It's almost 4 years ago. So,
Okay.
Driveline has done some version of youth training basically since we started in 2009. Like we've trained kids in some way, shape, or form through that entire process. We just didn't formalize that and actually have a department for it until basically 2020. Right when we knew we were moving into a new space, we actually had the real estate finally to be able to do team training instead of kind of shorter duration stuff. And that's when we started kind of the youth department. We started academy as like a product, and it's all been kind of rolling from there.
Awesome. And you guys have your Washington location and your new Scottsdale location in Arizona out here by me.
Yep.
Is that the only two?
For now.
Okay.
For now, we got two places. Further physical expansion is very much in the cards. I can't tell you timeline wise what that looks like.
Sure.
But yeah, we want to continue to grow and expand just because, we have products that kind of kids can do all over the world. Like our Academy Online program, we literally have kids all over the globe. And it's pretty good, but the in-person experience and specifically the team experience, because we can bundle skill training and competition in kind of one container, I think it's the best way for us to do the most for our kids. And to do that, we need to expand physically. So 2 locations right now, Scottsdale and Seattle, but more soon to come.
And I know I've seen bits and pieces of what you guys are doing over at Scottsdale, and kind of what you just said, it seems like you guys are doing the tournaments and the games, but also making sure you focus on the training and the athletes getting bigger, better, stronger.
Yeah, we've gone from we've run a 0 to 1 in Scottsdale, which is huge. That's always the biggest step. Where we are now is I think probably going from like 1 to 1.5. And to be honest, I think we probably made a little bit of a mistake in the way that we launched our Arizona facility, in that we weren't different enough. So if you kind of go all the way back, right, the reason that Driveline is in the position that it is, the reason that Kyle and Mike have been so successful in building up the company is because our stuff for player development just works, right? The reason that we are probably, the biggest internationally known brand in baseball player development is because our stuff works. The mechanism by which that it works requires consistency, right? That's how we are able to get the results that we are at all sorts of different levels, right? At the youth level with MVPs and everything in between, right? The reason we're able to get those results is you have to have some amount of time where you're really consistent with stimulus. That's just the mechanism for player development. And when we launched our teams in Arizona, I think we wanted to give something that was palatable to parents down there who are accustomed to year-round baseball.
Tournaments.
Right. And the problem is that when you're in that kind of competitive mode, you don't have enough time to kind of specifically address skill development. You can do some of it. And we've got some data on our kids down in the academy in Scottsdale where we know that we're seeing some improvement on skill, and that's great. We can't get all of that until, truthfully, we're outside of this competitive phase. And to be honest, I think the mistake that we made was having those teams start up with like 6.5 weeks of kind of onboarding and a little bit of development and then going into competition, instead of doing the thing that I think we know works, which is take a longer period of time, focus strictly on skill so you don't have to worry about burning calories on the competitive side, and then at that point go into competitive play. There are some challenges in Arizona relative to kind of like the timing of the middle school seasons, the timing of the high school seasons that we were trying to work around. I think we had the best of intentions, but I think it's put us in a position where we just didn't get a chance to kind of start with the thing that we're the best at. We had a little bit of time for that, and then we had to go into competition, which is not the end of the world, right? Those kids are going to go into a competition phase, into a development phase only in, about 3 or 4 weeks. Like we'll be able to lean into that. It's just a little bit backwards than I think the way that we normally want to do it. And, the big lesson learned is just we're not going to make that mistake again. When we go
how long is that development phase typically?
So we're kind of just starting with like a completely clean slate. The example I'll give is kind of the way that we run our teams here in Washington, because Washington is not kind of a year-round play area the way that Arizona is. So I think it's a little bit more representative of what we would prefer for our schedule. So we have our teams generally finish playing in here around July. August and September, we really want to have that 2-month period of time stop throwing, right? That's our period of time to give these kids some time off from throwing. We understand that the most significant and prevalent youth baseball injuries are largely repetitive stress injuries. We got to take some amount of the calendar year to kind of shut down on the throwing side. So August and September for our returning players, in ideally for our new players as well as our no-throw period. But that is a period of time where we can focus specifically on hitting and strength development. So when we get to October, that's what we call our onboard. And we're generally going to spend somewhere around 4 to 5 weeks kind of slowly ramping back up to competitive levels of intent. In that period of time when we're onboarding, that's not the time that you want to see kids have like big PRs in throwing velocity, right? That's not the intention of that time. We're trying to be really calculated and deliberate about progressively kind of upping the volume of throwing that we're doing and the intensity of throwing that we're doing, to the point that by, early-ish November, we're really to go into a velocity development phase. That velocity development phase is going to take about, 6 weeks is kind of the general program. And over the course, so if you think about the 4 weeks of onboarding plus the 6 weeks of velocity development, that's 10 weeks right there. During that period of time, we can certainly focus on bat speed development. So you can kind of do both of those things mostly at the same time. You don't really want to mix like different modalities of high intent training. So like on a day that we might be doing some really high intent throwing, we probably don't want to make that a bat speed day, right? But that can be a bat to ball skill day or a swing decision day. So if you've got 4 weeks of onboard and 6 weeks of development, let's say you take another 2 to 4 weeks of what we would call like a blend to season, right? We've got some new toys. We're moving the bat faster. We're hitting the ball harder. We're throwing the ball harder. Now we want to spend some amount of time like making sure that we're optimizing for developing those new tools in a competitive environment. So like in a bat speed day, I really want kids. It's like the swing should look like what you see if it's like a 3-0 middle, right? This is get your A swing off day, right? In that phase of things. The closer we get to season, the more that we want to lean into things like swing decisions, right? So you might be seeing like mixed pitch BP. You might see mixed pitch off of one of our iPitch pitching machines where we can quickly go between curveball, fastball, slider, right? The closer you get to the competitive reality of the game, the more you want to lean into that type of training, right? Nobody wants to see you get on the mound and like zoo balls over the backstop. That ain't it. So we got to take some amount of time to do that too. So 4-week onboard, 6-week development, another 4 week of kind of blend a season. That's 14 weeks ish is kind of a preference. So 2.5 months, right? Let's say 2.5 to 3 months is you can get a lot done developmentally in that amount of time.
Yeah. Which, when you go back to talking about Arizona, it's tough to get parents to buy into that because we're blessed. Honestly, I think in the ideal world, and I think of having young kids that we're not there yet, but I almost feel like the summer is the best time to take off because the winter you can get outdoors. And
right.
So I really have, as a parent with my own kids, thought about when they get older, maybe going that route of taking the summer off and getting indoors, training, playing other sports, whatever it may be. But because for those that aren't from Arizona, it is just you have tournaments literally year round.
Yep.
And parents have really the tournament directors have done a good job on selling the parents on it. So if you're not playing year round, they think that you're not getting better, and they haven't really. No one has come in and done what you're trying to do. And kids I've coached, I've tried to preach to them that, like, yeah, it's cool to win a tournament, but who gives a crap, really? Like, at the end of the day, like, of course you want to work on what you're talking about right now, work on your skills, get those new tools, and then go test them in a game situation. But it's the parents, it's new. So for you, I think it'll be successful.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of slowly but steadily them buying into it more and more.
Yeah, I mean, and ultimately what this really gets to is, kind of the crux of what we, and I mean coaches and parents in youth baseball, intend for the intention of this activity to be, right?
Yeah.
If it's all about winning, right, that is going to push you into, largely where Arizona is right now. Tournaments every weekend, in the way that clubs that kind of participate in that ecosystem, the way that we kind of put the value proposition to parents. Well, we're going to be playing here. We're going to be playing here. We're going to be playing here. I'm going to talk to parents about, the competitive record of my 9U, 10U team, because that's also part of the value proposition, right? Naturally, parents want their children to be safe. Winning is a safe and palatable outcome. So if I go, hey, we're the winningest winners in 10U, right? And we're going to be playing all this weekend, as a parent, I don't fault anybody that's like, yeah, I want that thing.
Yeah.
But here's the problem. 90-foot baseball is significantly different than 60-foot baseball, 5480, 5070, what have you. It's a completely different physical landscape, obviously. But I think the degree to which that landscape kind of necessitates different types of skills is largely under-indexed for by parents. And again, think about it, right? If you are a young parent, and your kid is 8, and they're a pretty good ball player, your local rec league, you kind of infer that, like, well, them just like playing rec ball and kind of dominating those kids, well, they need a higher level of challenge, right? So you go into the travel ball space, and you win all these games, and like your high school coach does not care, just like straight up. Your college coach for sure doesn't care. Like no college coach that's recruiting you is going to tell me about your 11U season. How'd that go? That's not a conversation, right?
Yeah.
So we exist in this environment in youth baseball where small fields, small people, and the skill set that can kind of help you win over there isn't evergreen,
Yeah.
And you can think about a lot of throwing programs, for example, and this isn't aimed at youth baseball. There are college and professional teams that up until recently have suffered this exact same flaw. They would have throwing programs where they don't want guys throwing over 120 feet.
I know when I was with the Rangers, the Royals, we shared the complex, and the Royals were not allowed to go past 120.
Right.
That was their. Yeah, I wasn't part of that organization, but you would see every single day they threw, and it was kind of mind blowing.
So we understand that that's a thing. What's the distance on the throw from like the 6 hole on a 90-foot field? 120, 130 feet.
Yeah.
If you're shooting 4 from the left field corner trying to get that runner, how long is that throw? It's definitely longer than 120 feet.
Mm-hmm.
The game that you're going to end up in when you hit 14, when you hit high school, is the game for the rest of your life. And if we miss opportunities to build skills that are not only, it's not optional, it's necessary. If you miss that opportunity to build those skills and you don't have a time machine, like, good luck. And I don't have a time machine. Like, I'd love to, it'd make things a lot easier if I did, but I don't. So our perspective on kind of that is, again, very different than kind of what's conventional, is that we have to build these things in advance, right? So the reason that we call them skills at scale is if you focus on it now, it's going to help you have fun and be competitive now, and it's going to build you to a more competitive version of yourself later. And that is the whole thing that I'm like trying to solve for. Baseball loses players at a disproportionate rate compared to any other sport in our country. More than baseball, more than basketball, more than soccer, more than football. We also deal with the most extreme change in competitive environment from like the 46, 60, 50, 70s to 90. It's massive. We deal with the largest physical change to our competitive environment. But if you're that kid who just like crushed everything from 8U to 13U, right? And you're swinging super hot U-trip bats, and it's a small field, and most of these hitters aren't good enough to punish you if you leave something middle. There's a lot of kind of like very specific things about the youth baseball environment that change when you hit 90 foot and you get a drop 3 BB core put in your hand. And now that bat is swinging you. So when Absolutely. when I see 13-year-olds that swing like drop 8s and drop 10s, and I've seen some, even more extreme than that, it's like, buddy, reality is coming for you in the next 12 months, and you cannot negotiate around it. And, and again, that whole issue gets kind of compounded in an environment where, like Arizona, right? It's to quote, Sean Carter, Jay-Z, it's the gift and the curse. You can play year round. And you can spend 12 months getting like this dopamine release about like, my kid is so good and my kid is so competitive and everything is going great. I can tell you, if your kid doesn't throw in the 7s when they hit a 90-foot field, it's tough for them to be competitive. And kids so it's just, our environment in youth baseball is very, very specific to youth. It doesn't particularly scale well. So our whole approach is, okay, well, how do we change that, right? We kind of have to take a different path, which means we have to spend our time differently. And that's the challenging thing, is letting parents understand that, like, look, I understand that in the short term, you're going to see all these other kids that they're playing games every single weekend, and that's great. How many of those kids will be competitive on a 90-foot field when they hit 14?
And that takes me to two things. So I got the opportunity to do an MLB scout program last week. And
I saw that, dude. I saw that.
It was really cool getting to go, and as a amateur or professional scout, you're looking at tools, right? And skills that scale, right? Like that's the first thing. Like, you go to see a high school kid, can he run? Can he hit? Can he hit for power? Can he throw?
Right.
And then you look at the glove. Winning a youth game, and this is the other part of that is I took you gave me the link to your course.
Yeah. Yep.
What's the name of the course again?
That would be the Youth Baseball Development Certification,
which I'm going to link that in the bottom. I thank you so much for that, because it really opened my eyes up to looking at youth baseball in a different way. And I think some organizations that have multiple teams would be very beneficial to have their coaches take that course, because when you talk about skills at scale and a kid that you get rewarded for putting the ball in play at a young level, because defense is lackluster, and as the kids get stronger and better, those ground balls where you just put the ball in play that are hits when you're 8, 9, 10, 13 years old are not hits at high school, are not hits on varsity. And so therefore, when you get to those bigger fields, you got rewarded for just putting the ball in play, but now you can't get the ball at the infield, and you might struggle making your high school team. But yet you were a good 10-year-old baseball player because you never struck out, but you never learned how to swing the bat with any speed. And so that's, or just throwing strikes, right? Like you hear that at every level of baseball, just throw a strike. Well, as kids get better and the mound backs up further and further, and you struggle even getting it to the catcher, who cares if you can throw strikes if you throw 60 miles an hour?
Yeah,
it's you're not going to pitch on varsity.
Correct. And not only that, but the problem is, I think for that kid who's got all of this signal that everything was working, and then it stops working. Now I'll get a little hippy dippy on you, right? we do a podcast for Academy. A couple weeks ago, we were talking about this clip that went around of a 14U game in Florida. I don't know if you saw this. It's like 15-1, and all you see is kind of like the coach enters stage left and like flies across the screen and this blur of red. He tries to tackle the umpire. He falls. It's a horrible look, right?
Yeah.
And, everybody kind of, we all repost that, and everybody can kind of agree that this is not what we want, right? This isn't the environment our children should be exposed to, like this kind of like associating violence with competitive play, adults that can't kind of manage their own emotions and behavior. We can largely agree that like that stuff is bad. But I went a little bit deeper. One of the kids on that team had played for 22 teams between the ages of 9U and 14U.
Wow.
And I'll go one level deeper. His 9U year, the record was like 48-2. The 12U year, it was like 48-9 or something like that, right? So just if you look at his 9U and his 12U year, he had won almost 90 games on these teams he had played on, and he had lost like barely a dozen. 13U year was like 4-26, or it was bad. The 14U year currently is like 3-21. There is a what we would call like a game theory optimal way to win a youth baseball game against youth players, and it just doesn't scale. But the problem is that we, quite frankly, we have a lot of dads and moms and people involved in youth baseball that I think their perspective is very short-sighted. So we say stuff to kids like, well, a fly ball only needs to be caught. A ground ball needs to be caught, thrown, and caught again. And that's true. The issue is not that that's a lie. That's true in youth baseball. But what does it really reveal? Well, it reveals that we acknowledge that kids aren't good fundamentally on defense when they're kids. Yeah. Kids struggle to throw accurately when they're kids. Kids struggle to catch accurately when they're kids. In the current term, all that stuff is correct. But if you were playing on a JV team and you get a grounder in the 6 hole on a starting shortstop on a JV, you expect that kid to make that play.
Yeah.
So we spend all this time from like 6U to 13U telling kids that you can just like punch it on the ground and that's going to work. We tell kids to just throw strikes, and we don't care how much velocity they harvest at the expense of accuracy. And then the world changes, right? Like the world completely changes. And you as a child, and this is the thing that worries me the most, and this is where I'm going to get a little hippy dippy on you, right? If your experience in youth baseball is predicated on winning, the joy that you find in this game is on winning strictly, and you win all the time. But that's not the future of your game, right? We understand that this thing scales difficulty very, very fast. We talk about baseball as like old farts, as like baseball is a game of failure. I don't really love that expression, but it's the old adage, right? You fail 7 times out of 10, you make it in the hall, yada, yada, right? Yeah. If I'm 12 years old and my identity as an athlete is wrapped up in the fact that every weekend, not only is it like the most important game we've ever played, because it's the Jimmy John's Triple Emerald Majors Intergalactic Elite Carpet World Grand Prix Championship, right?
Yeah.
We impart to children all this consequence that first of all isn't real. And then we celebrate them when they win, but then we're surprised when they don't have the context to deal with the inevitable failure that is integral to our game.
Yes.
We're not cultivating, I think, the resilience that guys like you had to work through all that stuff. Everybody that I've talked to that have played this game at a way higher level than I have has struggled through some sort of like stuff, right? Everybody goes through that. If you're a child and your experience in this game is like everything is just like lilies and flowers and we win all the time and everything's good, well, look, man, that doesn't last forever. Not unless you're the Mike Trouts, the Bryce Harpers of the world. And most of us aren't, right? Yeah. And the reality is that most of these kids...
And those players probably will make it regardless of what they do. You could put them on a team that wins, a team that like they're going to be who they're going to be. It's all the players in between
100%
that have to figure out how to work to get there.
100%.
They don't understand how to work if we're just focusing on winning.
And this is where it gets really gross. Let's be honest about the fact that the overwhelming majority of these kids that we, that again, like I take checks from parents. I have youth teams that play games and train. Do I want all of them to be like MLB prospects? Absolutely. Do I want these kids to have an opportunity to play college baseball? Yes, for sure. And I'm going to burn every single calorie I can to help them get there. But the reality is that all of them won't. That's just the truth. College rosters are relatively constricted because you can't build more colleges, right?
It's actually getting harder now that you have less rounds in the draft, minor league teams cut teams. We were talking about that last week, that college is only going to get better. And the competition, it got backed up with COVID, and now it's going to now get backed up because with less rounds and less minor league teams, better players are going to go to college. And a lot of those high school draft picks will end up in college now.
And even the portal, right?
Yep.
If you're a really good high school player and I'm a D1 coach and I go, all right, well, I can take a risk on this 19-year-old and I have no idea how that kid functions when he's not under his parents' supervision. Or do I go with that 22-year-old kid that's played 2 years at JUCO and he's figured his stuff out and I want to keep my job?
Yeah.
I get a 2 year more mature, physically mature player, a 2 year more mentally mature player. Hey, that high school kid's probably going to have to go JUCO. But again, it's not even about those kids that have the opportunity to play college baseball. It's about the kids who are going to play through high school and be done. How do we give value to those kids who don't have an opportunity to play in the future? Do I give them value by teaching them that like winning is the only palatable outcome, and that if you struggle and you should just quit? Or do I teach them that all this other stuff that our game can be a conduit for, building your own character and sense of self, struggling through resilience, perseverance? I think that the way that we construct the environment of youth baseball can be informative to all of these kids developing those type of attributes that can serve them throughout the rest of their adult lives. And I think giving them that as a value proposition is much more likely to have that man or woman, when they decide to start a family, want their kids to play baseball. Absolutely. Because those kids that we burn out of our game at 10, 11, 12, 13, because they're sick and tired of fat old guys like me yelling and screaming at them. They're sick and tired of the game making them feel crappy about their participation because there were 12 teams in this tournament and 12 kids on one of those teams gets a feel good and everybody else feels crappy. Those are the kids that I think are less likely to want their kids to play baseball. And that's a problem.
Absolutely. In baseball, you see viewership over the last 10 years has gone down and down. And I know for sure basketball has passed up baseball in viewership in the last 10 years. I 100% agree with everything you said. I definitely think that, and that's what I try to. So Fridays I coach a 9U and a 10U team. They're in league play. Cal Ripken, and there's an 8-year-old, and the league is actually 10U, but that's how they have the league constructed. If you're under this age, you're in minors. Big kid, left-handed hitter. I love the kid. Great kid. Really like him. Nice kid. First at bat, first game he strikes out twice, and he didn't swing the bat. And I said, okay. I want you, if it is close to a strike, I want you to swing and swing hard. You're going to figure it out. But this year, if you strike out 9,000 times, who cares? You're going to get better. You're not going to get better going up there praying for a walk. And that's another part. You look at these tournaments, a lot of it can be watered down competition, and you go play a team that you beat their brains out 12-0, you run rule them, you feel great about yourself, but you guys had 8 to 10 walks.
Right.
Did you actually get better? Did you learn anything? Or did you learn, hey, I get rewarded for not swinging the bat, or wait till I get 2 strikes, hope he walks me, if not, punch the ball on the ground. So you're not even with the games. And that's where my biggest thing that I try to get across to parents is you can't be focused on the tournaments because a lot of times you have to have a coach that understands how to coach in game to make you better. Because yes, there are coaches that can coach in game and make you better with your approaches, your swings. But a lot of coaches focus on the results. Did you get a hit? Did you get out? And there's a big difference. Did you take a good swing and you just missed it? Or did you have a bad approach? So, yeah, and that's just kind of the state of baseball all around. I don't knock anyone for doing it that way because that's all that a lot of people know.
100%.
It's what they know. And you either had to have played the game or just be able to look at it from a different lens. And that's what I'm hoping guys like you are able to get across to more and more people.
And I'm trying, bro.
And you're doing a great job at it. I know there's a social media troll that I don't know if you've seen. I've been on there commenting a couple of times, and he just does it. Some people just don't get it, and then they're promoting garbage and knocking down other people that are trying to do it. And not everyone does it in the right way or in a way that you agree with. It doesn't make them bad or wrong. And I've challenged that guy, and I'm not going to say names, but what are you giving back to make the game better?
Well, right. And how much do you actually understand about what's going on right now? I think it's real easy, like most things, to kind of chirp from the sidelines. I think it's different. And again, like I'm being honest about the fact that I think kind of the schedule construction of how we started in Scottsdale is something that, we won't do that again. We learned from that mistake, right? Because we're in the proverbial trenches with boots on the proverbial ground, learning these lessons right now. And like that whole, that thing we're just talking about kind of like having our game be a conduit for kids, cultivating a sense of perseverance. I don't know if you've watched, there's a documentary on HBO right now on Tony Hawk, the professional skateboarder, called Till the Wheels Fall Off. It's probably the best doc that I've seen in years. I think everybody should see it. But one of the interesting things in there is at the beginning of the doc, it starts with Tony Hawk. He's trying to land the 900, right? The 900 is a trick that Tony Hawk invented where he literally goes in the air and does 900 degrees of rotation. So 2 full 360s and another 180 on top of that. He invented the trick. He was the first to ever land it. And now he is like a 47, 48-year-old man, and he's still trying to land it, right? And he's in his own little, skate area, and he falls over and over and over and over and over and over again. And the doc basically starts from that point with this wide shot of Tony Hawk on the ground. Like, and this is a guy who's had, history of concussions. He's beat the crap out of his body in this endeavor, right? His passion. But he, through this whole experience, kind of cultivated this sense that, like, I'm going to learn. Like each one of these failures is a learning opportunity to figure out what I could do differently the next time. We have this issue in youth baseball because it's predominantly parents like us that are coaching kids. There's no unified structure of training. There's no unified structure of understanding child psychology, childhood cognitive development. We don't get any of that. We largely just kind of do the thing that we did. There have been a couple of videos in the last couple of weeks of some really abhorrent behavior by parents. There was one down at Huntington Beach where this dad is just like wearing out his son for literally like 2.5 minutes, cursing at him, castigating every single failure he has. It's really, really brutal. But it's not surprising when that stuff happens, because I would bet you that guy was treated the exact same way by his dad or by his coaches. There's very much some like hurt people energy about this whole thing. Absolutely. And even as parents, one of the things that I got wrong, and I still need to like hold myself to, is if I'm not watching my kids' game or if I'm not watching their practice and they come in the car, and the first thing I ask is like, well, how'd it go? And what I'm really digging at is like, what was the competitive result? Did you win or did you lose? That's the thing I'm asking. And the moment that I send that signal to my child, and that's the first thing that I ask, I'm inferring my priority. right? And again, as children, what do we generally want to do? We want to make our parents happy. We want them to be proud of us. So the thing that I've started to try really, really be better about, we hit on this in kind of the youth baseball dev certification. I certainly was influenced in changing my mind about this stuff through PCA, the Positive Coaching Alliance, is ask a question that's different. And the question that I try to ask most commonly is like, what did you learn? What were you working on? Yeah. Because the moment that I frame it that way, not only am I opening the door for my child to like talk and communicate to me, but I'm framing it around learning. I'm framing it around development. I'm not framing it around outcome. Absolutely. Now, is there a way? And to be clear, like, you can do both of these things, right? The fundamental kind of approach that we believe in the skills at scale thing, right, is that, like, yes, we have an eye towards the future and the long-term value prop, but this stuff also helps now. Like, to be really clear about it, we're not saying that like location is important and velocity is the only thing that we care about. We're saying that we need to pay attention to both.
Absolutely.
I'm not saying that kids should like move the bat fast and swing at air, right? I'm saying hit the ball hard all the time. Yeah, are you going to get some hard hit ground balls? Sure, but the harder you hit those ground balls, the more likely they are to turn into base hits.
Yes.
Like we see this at the highest level of the game. You'll see like these oppo flares that go over the second baseman's head.
One of the things in scout school they're talking about, guys that, especially younger pro guys, hard hit doubles, barrel awareness, those are going to lead to home runs as they get bigger and stronger. Right? They're not driving the ball out of the ballpark right now, but there's a good chance if he has a good feel for the bat, good ball to bat skill, like those are going to lead to home runs.
Right.
And if a kid can hit the ball on the ground hard, as he comes more aware of his swing, those are going to probably lead to line drives.
Right. And think about, some of the guys that you and I know that are very trollish in our space, right? Yeah. They short to it, long through it, right? Knob to the ball, et cetera, all this kind of mechanical stuff. And it's like, I honestly believe one of the biggest improvements we can make to youth baseball is just agree kind of on like, what's the objective, right? All those guys would tell you that Ted Williams is the best hitter that ever lived, right? How many of them have read Ted's book? How many of them acknowledge that, like, what Ted, with a little bit of ego, because it's Ted and I love him for that, right? What does Ted Williams say is the ideal swing? It's the Williams upswing, right? It's like that thing. Positive attack angle of the bat meets negative descent angle of the pitch, flush contact, right? Again, we regurgitate this stuff that we were given, right?
Absolutely.
Pitcher supplies the power. No, he doesn't. That's a lie. That's just straight up a lie. And thanks to the work of guys like Dr. Alan Nathan at the University of Illinois, we understand that through physics, right? 1 mile an hour of bat speed produces 1.2 miles an hour of exit velocity. 1 mile an hour of pitch velocity produces 1.2 or 0.2 miles an hour of exit velocity. There's a 1 mile an hour difference. If you think you can hit the ball hard by not moving the bat fast, you're arguing with physics. And you can do that as much as you want, but you will run out of breath before you are right. We have science, we have data, we understand what's good in the game, but like we regurgitate these tropes about kind of training as if it's a bad thing to tell a kid to hit a line drive. Well, what's a line drive? It's a hard hit ball in the air. But again, you've got Mr. Yes. Ground ball needs to be caught, thrown, and caught again. And it's not the problem is not that guy is wrong in the current term. The problem is that he's wrong in the long term. Yeah. And that is the trap that we're laying for these kids, is we're just selling them wolf tickets like this stuff works forever, and it just doesn't.
Yeah. And then there becomes a level of awareness of what you need as an individual. And obviously for an 8-year-old, that's a little different, but as they get older, they become more aware of their body. I got the chance to play with Rafael Palmeiro when he did his comeback at 54 years old. I remember an argument in the clubhouse of if he swung up on the ball or down to the ball. And he swears to this day that he swings down on the ball. Yeah. And we pulled up video, and clearly he does not.
Yep.
He swings up on the ball. And I think that even to those guys, like, he probably told himself to swing down because he probably had a tendency to get under it and hit pop-up. So that worked for him, but he did not swing down on the ball. But that's probably what he told himself to keep from popping it up in the infield. But, but you have these older guys that's what they were told. And now they're just, my high school coach coached at the same high school for 33 years, and he coached the same way when I was there as he did when Jay Buhner was there in 1990. So, definitely a lot of the science we have nowadays, to be able to go against some of these stuff that we were taught or they were taught, and they just, I don't know why they're so hesitant to buy in or just to find a middle ground, because there's not even, there's even in baseball. I do think sometimes some teams, organizations are pushing the needle a little too far with the new school, like powers everything. Like I do think like some teams need a little bit more balance in their lineup and a couple of speedsters that are more contact guys, but those contact guys still drive the ball. They're not hitting ground balls.
Well, and if you really want to get real about it, I'm pretty sure that last year every single position player in Major League Baseball had at least one baseball that was hit 100 miles an hour or harder.
Yep.
Like
exactly.
Like that's just the reality. And you're also talking about like, what we would classify at the major league level as like soft hitting guys, right? All of them can hit a ball 100 miles an hour. Okay.
Yeah.
So if you've got a child that is cursed with like this deep love of this infuriating game, and I do think it is a little bit of a curse sometimes, because I see these kids who like, their whole identity is wrapped up in themselves as a baseball player. And it's challenging because we know how hard our game is, right? We know the amount of stratification that's going to take place. We know that it's going to require this insane combination of like genetics and work ethic and programs. You have to address everything. It's really, really, really challenging. But if you're that kid at 12, you don't have, your perspective is not big enough.
Of course.
And yeah, you can gain a lot of kind of low-hanging fruit in terms of outcome, and things like hitting the ball harder and throwing the ball harder relatively easy.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to go from like 60 to 70 and even 70 to 80 than it is to go from 80 to 85. Then it goes to 85 to 90. 90 plus is just like you're a whole different animal. There aren't a lot of human beings that throw in the nines, much less mid-nines, much less hundos. The reason that guys throw hundreds and zoo the ball all over the place, like the Wild thing in Major League, is because there's a coach somewhere that believes that they can fix that kid. And the reality is that those coaches are much more likely to take a risk on that kid than your high school senior that throws like mid sevens. Like that's just, and I see this stuff all the time. Like, on these Facebook parent groups, there'll be these, it's like literally like clockwork. Every year there's this mom or a dad who's like, here's some video of my child. And he's 77, 78, top 79. He gets outs all over the place. I can't understand why no college coaches want to give him a shot. The kid gets outs, and it's like, yeah, that's true. But there's probably like 2 million other kids that are just like yours, right? Like that's the reality. And if you had a time machine, you could go backwards and change the way that you spent time at 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. And I believe change your foundation and your presentation as an athletic, as it's just strictly on the athletic stuff, which is going to fuel all the baseball skill stuff. So like the Maddox thing is tough. But the other thing that we also kind of like fundamentally want to disregard is that like Maddox was like 92, 94 in high school, in a time where the average major league fastball was like 89.
Yes. If that.
If that, right? And if you listen to Greg Maddux, he's very clear on this. He's like, velocity will get you drafted. Okay, what does that tell you? At the highest level of things, there is a floor to output. And if you don't match that floor, you are just not going to get looks. And that's the truth. And again, it doesn't mean that every kid in youth baseball should be trying to throw nines when they're 14. I've seen that, right? Like there are kids that are like 14, 15U that are in the nines. Yes, that's absolutely a fact. You can find it on Perfect Games website. That's a real thing. That is also a child that has a body of an 18-year-old, right? Biological development is not linear. Some of these kids are going to be biologically advanced. Some of them are going to be biologically regressive. If we're smart and we kind of just go like, hey, I'm going to use data and technology to assess where you're starting, and we're just going to keep kind of like watching that over time, you have a map, like you have a map that has a starting place and an ending place, and you can progressively build towards that. And like, the problem with baseball not training with data and not training kids with data is like you're running like a machine shop without a dyno. If I'm in the engine building business, right, and I don't have a dyno, I am playing a game of whack-a-mole constantly, and I am trying like new heads, new injection, turbo, new exhaust, new compression settings, and I'm just like throwing stuff at the wall and trying to like figure out what's going to work. If I'm trying to run that as a business, I'm running like an engine shop, and I don't have a dyno, how many customers am I going to have? Yep. Zero, right? If you just dip your toe in this world of like data-driven development and you get like a bat sensor or you get a pocket radar, it's not going to cost you a lot of money, but you're going to understand where you're starting from. And if you understand where you're starting from, all you have to do is keep working, and that work is either going to show your skills are progressing, or it's going to show that your skills are kind of like treading water. You're just getting like normalized expected biological gains. It doesn't have to be that way. But you have to, you have to have a dyno. You have to have some sort of technology to understand this is where you're starting right now. This is where I want to get to. In the real magic there, like the school development is great. The thing that I want kids to learn is that like if they actually work hard at this stuff, that they see improvement. And then you just like now we're just changing the way that you understand life.
Now we're taking that on past baseball.
Right.
When you go out in the real world and you go to get a job and you start off at the bottom, and now you understand I want to get to here. I have to work and make sure I'm working to get there.
Right.
And not just going through the motions.
It's applicable. If you're a chef, it's applicable. If you're a painter, it's applicable. If you're an accountant. But the problem with like, the lesson model where it doesn't involve data, how would you know that any of this stuff that you're working on actually has any positive result, right? Yeah. You are putting a new carb or a new injection system on this motor, and you have no data, you have no dyno to quantify the improvement in horsepower. And like
I think that's where we come down to the only data that we have is our tournaments.
Right. The only data we have is Game Changer, right? And my kid's batting 900 or whatever in Game Changer. Whoop-de-flip-and-do.
So the hitting lesson with Dad in the backyard must be working, or the team that we're on, it must be working because we're winning games. And yeah, it doesn't mean you're getting better.
And it doesn't. I mean, honestly, it doesn't even require technology, right? There are plenty of sessions that my son and daughter have had where we've gone down to our local field, and I didn't have a bat sensor on, but I am cognizant of how hard and far they are hitting the ball.
Yes.
The moment. The reason that like the moment that my son hit his first over the fence home run, which happened when we were on a field in training, the moment that my daughter hit her first over the field home run, which happened to be in competition, the reason that those moments were so special is because they understood what it took to get there. Like homers are cool, but I know that fence is 225 feet away. And I've spent years working up towards that achievement, and now I know that I have the capacity to do that.
Yep.
You can, again, bat sensor is going to be like $150, Diamond Kinetics or Blast or whatever. Take some swings. You're going to understand your swing speed. Do it again in 2 days and see what those swing speeds look like, right? You're getting a peek under the hood. You can also just play games with kids. Hey, we're going to do a round of 8. How many lineas can you generate? How many liners? How many line drives? 6 out of 8, 4 out of 8. Cool. Okay, next round. We knew last round we hit 4 out of 8. Let's try to hit 5. You give kids goals, you give them objectives, you let them work towards them. And if those objectives are either data driven or it's just something we can kind of universally agree is good, it's going to help that kid get better. But again, in the lesson environment, a lot of times it's like, I'm just going to give you like a salad buffet of words about all the things that I think are visually wrong with your swing. And like, of course, it's a child. There's going to be a ton of stuff wrong with their swing. They have an immature body.
And to put that into perspective for a parent, the blast motion, you said 150. You could save 150 on buying a cheaper bat, which isn't going to make them a better baseball player. And instead of spending 250 on the bat, spend 100 and get the blast motion to go with it. Or yeah. And so, or even for me, I love the bomb bats because it teaches them to swing a wood bat, and that's going to last forever. That bomb bat's going to stay good. They get to swing a wood bat. Yes, it might not result in as much off the bat speed in a game environment, but they're swinging a wood bat. Yeah, that's a little bit more expensive, but they're going to have that for, especially once you get to high school ages. Just swing it all summer long. They're going to get better swinging that as well.
BB core is coming for you. Drop 3 is coming for you. And yeah, when that kid gets handed even like the bombs, my son, what did he swing? He had a Victus. Victus was the wood bat that he had, and it was like a drop. It was like drop 5 or drop 6. Because woods, it's a little. It's going to be a range. And we would go to the field, and he would have like a USA bat, a wood bat, and either like one of our Axe Bat speed trainers or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we're swinging a bunch of different bats. So again, this is I take a little bit of an issue with Ted Williams and kind of the way that he, Ted would go down to the field and take 400 swings until his hands bleed with one bat, right? Well, again, because of science and technology, we understand things like contextual interference. We understand that there's some benefit to kids actually swinging different implements because the arousal rate in the brain goes up because you're giving them some different stimulus. So we go down there, hey, we're going to bring 3 bats. The intention is the same for all of them. But because you're giving them different lengths or different widths, their mechanics have to kind of center around a really clear objective of what they're trying to go, what you're trying to produce, right? Trying to produce a line drive, hard hit ball in the air. It's just a yes or no about whether we achieve that goal. And there's a bunch of different ways that they can get there. Like my kid when he was younger had a gigantic leg kick. It was very like Sadaharu O, if anybody's familiar with the Japanese home run king. It was a huge, huge leg kick. And, because I'm a baseball dad and I'm proud of my kid, I, put swings that he has taken up on my socials, right? And one of those days, somebody took a screenshot of my kid at like peak leg lift. So like the knee is like basically at belly button or up. He's getting into it. And I'll never forget this caption. The caption goes, if anybody is teaching their kid to swing like this, they should be put in jail immediately. And I was like, all right, cool, block, move on, whatever. Corbin Carroll, Arizona Diamondback, is a Seattle area native.
Okay.
And I think it was last week, I looked up some old footage of him in high school. You know what a swing looks like? Gigantic leg kick. And that was him being like the number 1 prospect in the state of Washington and getting drafted, right? We obsess over the mechanical movements of children who, from a biological, physiological coordination level, are just they're kids. They're not small adults, right? They're children. And we obsess over this stuff. We specifically obsess over it in the lesson model. And we ignore the fact that like the best players, they're generally not going to have like their mechanics locked down at 18 and they're never going to change. And you can play this game with anybody. Play with Bryce Harper, play with Corbin Carroll, play it with whoever. Mike Trout, look at how he looked in high school and look at how his swing is now. It's not the same. But again, we infer that there's like this mechanical panacea that we can get to that's going to help us hit 900 in Game Changer in our 11U tournament.
Yeah.
And if you ignore the fact that like production is not predicated on bad defense, real production is predicated on hitting the ball hard. It's a simple thing. It's a simple thing we should be able to agree on. And if we do that and we have more tolerance for kind of like the mechanical changes that I think should be expected when kids are developing in our game, then that kid has one North Star. And as a coach, my relationship with that kid doesn't have to be couched in negativity about all these kind of mechanical flaws that they made. Can we help kids' mechanics improve? Yes, absolutely. We do that every single day. We have a drill series. We do overload, underload bats, short bats, long bats. All of that stuff is designed to help develop mechanics in kids. But the objective is really, really simple. Be on time, move the bat fast, hit the ball hard. And ideally, hit the ball hard in the air. But again, you know, for the overwhelming majority of our youth baseball ecosystem, you're talking about coaches that don't have as much training.
Especially the younger you get. Especially, right. You know, you talk about your son. Obviously, like, I think there's something comes to that. Let him be himself, be athletic. Don't overcoach and take his athleticism away where he's being a robot too young.
100%.
And, you know, which it's T-ball, totally different. But my son's T-ball. I tell him, hands together.
Yep.
Hit the ball as hard as you can right in the middle. Everything else, I don't care.
Yeah.
We'll figure that out. And if they're good athletes and as they become good athletes, they'll figure it out themselves usually. You know, there's a lot to that. The more athletic you are, the more you can get away with in pitching mechanics or a swing because you're a good athlete. So if we take that away from them too young by trying to have them focus mechanically, we're doing them a disservice.
It's a brutal one, right? And like, you know, there's a quote by Stan Musial, like literal legend in our game, that we've got a new book on youth training that's coming out, should be out before the end of this year, and it's in the book. I just had to look it up real quick. This is Stan flipping Musial, right? The one unbreakable rule about hitting is this: if a batter hits well with his own particular stance and swing, think twice or more before suggesting a change.
There you go.
How many millions of children in our country every single day are getting the opposite of that?
Yep. Exact opposite.
And how much of that kind of obsession about kind of mechanical perfection on a small child that is not an adult, we're associating like more failure with our game than we need to with kids that like literally from a cognitive and emotional development standpoint don't have the tools to deal with it. And then as parents, we double down on that. How'd it go? Did you win? What's the batting average in Game Changer? Who cares? Literally who cares? And you know,
one of the worst things you can do too, you have your coach that is harping something mechanical with them, and then you have the parents saying something totally different. Now we just confuse the kid.
Yep.
That's a whole nother topic. But you know, when you have multiple sources or even coaches that aren't on the same page, and I actually dealt with that in pro ball. I had 3-4 different pitching coaches from coordinator to coaches all tell me something slightly different. They kind of contradicted each other. And now as a high school draft pick at 18 years old, now I'm confused.
Who do you trust? Right?
Exactly.
Who are you supposed to trust? So it's like when you look at, you know, when I'm a lifelong Dodger guy, so it's hard for me to give props to the Astros. However, when they orchestrated that rebuild, right, famously, they got a bunch of people on the phone at the same time that they knew were not on the same page about their developmental ideal in the way that every piece of that organization, from like instructs all the way to AAA and the majors, they had to be on the same page. And they knew some of those guys didn't want to see it that way. And they fired them all. They fired like 40 people on one phone call. You do that because you need organizational consistency. You can't have that thing where like the farm guy thinks one thing, the single A guy thinks one thing, the double A guy thinks another thing, and then the triple, like you can't have that because it's messy for professionals. Right?
There was go to a 10-year-old and you're setting them up for failure.
And it's like, there was a clip like a week ago of a kid that plays for Nick Saban. And he was talking about like how Saban coaches him. He was like, the thing that I realized is I need to listen to the words and not pay attention to the tone. And that's an adult, right? That's an adult, collegiate, highest level of competition other than the NFL guy going like, hey, I need to be aware of that process. So when you're on these fields, seeing kids play every single weekend, and you listen to the way that they are coached by parents, ask yourself the question, are they being coached in a way that the child is able to like discern, okay, well, I'm not going to pay attention to the way that this guy is screaming at me. I'm just going to pay attention to the words. That's a child, man. Like that's a child. But it's understandable when parents who coach get their kind of emotions turned up to 11 that way when they believe that there's consequence to this stuff, right? If we don't win the 11U, Big Mac Junior St. Patrick's Day championship or whatever, if we don't win that, then these parents aren't going to give me their money, right? I mean, let's call a spade a spade.
Yep.
We stress over the competition result because I know that like this club hopping thing is real. That kid who had played 22 teams from 9U to 14U, that's a real thing. And it's for sure a real thing in Arizona.
Yep.
So you're constantly searching for like the answer. And I truly believe that if you just put like a blast or a diamond kinetic sensor on that kid's bat, that's the solution. Like the solution is to understand where you actually are in terms of quantifiable skill. Because if you understand where you start, you can understand that you need to get better, and you can understand the things that help you get better and the things that don't. Like we just did an episode of the podcast that I think I'll have published sometime today. I was looking at 3 years of development for one of the kids in the academy. He's been with us for all 3 years. And it was like October, November of like 2021. And he finally hit a ball like 80 miles an hour. He didn't hit another ball over 80 for 5 months.
Wow.
What took place in that 5-month period of time? Well, at a certain point, once we get into like February, March, is when our competition phase starts.
Okay.
People don't really want to have that conversation about like the amount of games that you're playing and the fatigue that you're introducing to your athlete having a definitive negative impact on skill.
Absolutely.
Like that's a real thing. We train with data. We're able to capture all this stuff. And that kid kept working through that and then turned 80 into 82, 82 into 83, 83 into 85, 85 into 87 or whatever, right? The whole thing is like this giant game of like resource allocation, right? We need kids to play games because they need to learn how to play the game. But we don't want to play too much that it gets in the way of our skill development. So you have to kind of balance all this stuff against each other. And when you train with data and you look at stuff like blast speed or look at stuff like bat speed, you look at stuff like thrown ball velocity, you can have an idea of what fatigue is kind of had the effect that fatigue is having on these kids. When you go out there and you're like a 13-year-old throwing sevens and you're 70, 73 every single weekend, the moment that 70, 73 turns into like 68, 70 or 66, 68, you are overworked, my guy. Like you need,
it actually just came to me that I interviewed 2 weeks ago a kid out here. Actually, he dropped out of high school and moved to the Dominican Republic and trained at academy. He had some connections. Crazy story. He ended up signing kind of crazy, dropped out freshman year. But when you look at Dominican players from Dominican, they have the tool sets. They don't always know how to pitch or how to play in a game.
Sure.
And so that's where organizations sign them. They say, yeah, this kid throws 98 at 17.
Sure.
Now let's teach him how to pitch or maybe to spin a ball or command or a hitter. Now they have to get the in-game reps and figure out how to make adjustments at the plate, but they can hit a ball 500 feet. And so, they're actually kind of like the exact opposite of us in Arizona, where we're lacking on the skill set. We really are. Like you think of Phoenix being such a big city. The baseball has come a long ways, and there's some big prospects. I mean, you have Kim and Eddie, who's number 3, and he reclassified from a junior to a senior. You know, he's going to be probably a top 5 pick, left-handed, 97, 17 years old, and he can hit pretty darn good too. But me personally, coming from Houston, where baseball is pretty high up there, like I was when I first moved out here in 2012. I was actually surprised at the level at the high school level, and I'm not trying to knock Phoenix, but where you think it would be at and where it was is not what I think it should be. And a lot of that comes to just like you said, the systems that have been put in place and people are buying into them. And people are also afraid to step out and do something differently because that might affect their pocketbook. That might affect them, especially if they do it as a full-time gig. That might affect them paying bills or not, doing something differently. So therefore, you try to do what everyone else does, but do it better, and that results in just focusing on winning. And as a parent, I think the club hopping thing. I mean, a lot of parents that do club hop, they're probably the first ones to knock someone like LeBron James for team hopping, right? So therefore, that'd be an interesting dive in to look at people's social medias and what they had to say about LeBron. But I'm okay with it on a certain level if it's for the right reasons, because you're paying good money, right? You're paying good money, and that's where it should be based on the coach and what the coach is doing to make your son a better player and a better human,
right?
Not if they win or lose.
Yeah, and it's just I think there are going to be a lot of parents that you're just talking about a customer base that is like fundamentally not as informed as they could be, and because of that, there are a bunch of different ways that you can kind of describe the way that your program works or describe the things that you value, and not really realize all of the opportunity that you're missing. And that's the biggest problem, is just it's basically this big choose your own adventure thing, right? And if you address the right things, you can set your child up for let's not even say anything about college or professional play. You can help your child have a positive lifelong association with athletics, right? Because and let's again call a spade a spade. The overwhelming majority of these kids are not going to go pro. They're not going to go D1. Like, that's just not going to be the way that the overwhelming majority of these kids are served. So what do you serve for that child, right? Like, what are we doing for them? And if you take those kids who, are not the Ken Caminittis, right? That aren't throwing mid nines and up, and you castigate them and just like, well, that kid is weak, or that kid doesn't have the skill, and you ignore the fact that child is like literally as adaptable to stimulus as anybody else, they're never going to learn the truth about what they're actually capable of. And that I think, again, is just like the tough part about it, because you're not giving them honest answers about like, look, there is a composition of a competitive high school player that if you make the most of your time from like 9 to 14, I think more kids could look like that. Are all those kids going to throw nines and up? No, absolutely. I don't think that's going to be the case, but I think we can be honest about what the composition of a competitive high school baseball player looks like and acknowledge that that's a thing we want to build towards. But if you do that, then you have to spend your time differently, right? That's just what it comes down to, is you have to accept that, you can have a Jordan Ventura, right? You can have a kid that's like skinny as a rail, might not be able to bench the bar, and he's going to be punching, mid nines, right? His stuff is gross. I know because of Jeremy Techtiel that I do my podcast with, and he's the director. He's one of the other. He runs the academy with me. Jeremy was a professional scout. You don't scout based on outliers, right? Jordan Ventura could throw mid nines and be rail thin. Most of us do not have that, genetic lottery ticket.
Yep.
Because we train with data, because we put our youth athletes through the same high performance, which is otherwise basically like a strength assessment. we put them in a scaled down version of the strength assessment that we would put our biggest name professional players through. We have this massive database about just kind of strength capacity, right? Which is different than skill. The overwhelming majority of the kids that are the best about skill are also the best about the athletic capacity. You cannot have one without the other. The era where you could pitch or play in professional baseball and have the physiological composition of like my mailman, hey man, like those days are gone. They just are.
Yep.
Google again, like Google Aroldis Chapman bicep cards.
Oh
You're
my
gonna see a picture of Aroldis sitting around a table with some of his buddies in the DR or Cuba or wherever, playing cards, and his biceps are literally like bigger than my thighs.
His shoulders go halfway up his neck. Like
Right.
guys don't realize that with the jersey on, but
Right. And
he's
so
jacked.
the thing we used to say back in the day is like success leaves clues, right? Athletic composition is going to define your skill. That's just the way that it works.
The event that I did last week, there was Greg Orr. He's been a scout
Yep.
for I don't know how long, but a very long time. He's very old school with his beliefs, and if you don't have a big league body, he doesn't think you're probably going to be a big leaguer. If you're a starting pitcher and you're not at least 6 foot, unless you're one of those rare outliers, he doesn't really want you. You know, that's kind of his judging point. A starting pitcher, 6 foot and above.
Right.
Start at 6 foot. And so, of course, like you mentioned, there are outliers to that, but that's fits a lot of people, can fit in that umbrella. So yeah, like you said, the body, and if you're not that height, if you're, a hitter and you're not tall, like you better be very strong and athletic, which is something you can work on.
And that's the thing, like we've understood this from a sports science standpoint for decades now, right?
Yeah.
But then you see, again, you see that kid who's like, 6'1", 152. Bro, my son is like 5'7" and he's 150. So what are you doing? Like the composition of the thing that you bring to this task, your physical body, if you spend some time and burn some calories addressing that, it's going to affect positively the way that you play this game in basically every aspect. Yeah. But in order to do that, you have to put time into it and you have to be consistent with it. And you also have to address the recovery part of it, right? Like that's again, the way that you get strong is not under a barbell. The way that you get strong is actually being under the barbell and then taking time to recover. You have that super compensation effect take place. That's how you get stronger.
And it's hard to do that when you're playing 4 to 5 games a weekend, and then you have 2 practices during the week, and you're trying to make sure you're healthy and recovered to play again the next weekend.
Yep, 100%. And
or if your team's not playing that weekend, a lot of players, you see them on these Facebook groups, they want to fill in, they want to play more games. It's like, you're already playing enough games with your team. You don't need more games on your plate.
Yeah.
I know it feels like we're beating the dead horse here, but for me, it's something I see so many people struggle with that concept. And I've tried to get it through the people's heads that I talk to. And I think it's just going to take more people like me and yourself that believe this to just keep going along with how we're going about things, and brick by brick, things are going to change and more people are going to get on board with it. And hopefully my oldest is 4. Hopefully by the time he's in high school, our youth baseball looks a little different. I hope so.
I really hope so. I realize, we're very much kind of at the beginning of things, with Driveline's involvement in youth baseball. Like we have not still gone from like 0 to 1 truly. We're still, we're 3 years into our Washington operation. We've got, a little bit close to halfway through our first year in Arizona. So we're at the beginning. But like the thing I'll tell you is we've got a crop of somewhere between, I don't know, 20 to 25 kids that are between 14U and 16U this year that I believe are going to be hitting balls 90 by the end of our season.
That's awesome.
Not all those kids are going to get from 90 to 95. Because again, it gets harder.
Yep.
Not all those kids are going to get from 95 to 100. But in the state of Washington, if we produced 20 to 25 kids that are hitting balls 95 or better, we would dominate every other, every like showcase leaderboard. And it's not because we started with the best athletes, right? Inherently in kind of the select travel baseball environment, when you start a new program, you don't generally get like the most talented kids, because those most talented kids are embedded in the organizations that they're playing for, and there's no signal that they're getting that would suggest that they would be better served somewhere else because they're winning.
Yep.
So I'm really interested to see kind of how things change in the next 12 to 18 months, because we've got a crop of kids that can bang. We're going to have, I think we'll have our first 2 kids that'll throw 9s this year. I got a crop of kids that are going to be throwing 8s and up this year, and we've still got like somewhere between 24 to 36 months to drive more improvement for those kids. And again, they're not all going to go D1. They're not all going to play professional baseball. As we get older in the academy, we certainly get more serious. I think by the time that we're playing in high school, we do believe that winning matters more, right? Because winning should be a reflection of the way that we spend on skills we knew that help our competitiveness. So there is kind of that switch, right? From like 9U to 13, 14U, let's build the foundation. Let's treat our competitive results in an appropriate fashion, acknowledging they don't really mean much. But the point of that whole perspective from 14U on down is that at 15U on up, it's winning time.
Yep.
It's winning time because of how we spent our time in the preceding 24 to 36 or 48 months, right? It's a long-term play.
In a sense, it's almost like now it's time as the organization to reap the benefits of the work you've put into the kids, and now they get to go win some tournaments. And again, that doesn't, that's going to result in more people coming and wanting to be with you, because blindly with they have their blinders up and they just see the winning side of it, and they don't understand like where that kid started at, unfortunately, and they don't see the big picture. But
yeah, I mean that's the chicken and the egg nature of it, right? It's just if you know when you start a new thing in kind of club select baseball, year of our Lord 2023, you're going to have to build it. Like it's going to be built, not bought. Our best Washington 14U team, they ended up in the championship of the big, club championship event. It was held just a little bit below us down in Oregon. Because again, we don't do the travel ball thing. I specifically don't call our program a travel ball program, because I have zero interest in flying 12-year-olds to Lake Point. Like I'm sorry. Like we don't do
absolutely.
that. So our big club championship event is down in Portland. So we're just, you're able to drive down, stay in a hotel. You're going to spend a couple $100 on food and hotel, and not literally thousands of dollars of airfare, hotel rental, cars, etc. So we end up in the championship. We play our way in, and we lost in the championship. We hit the ball harder. We threw the ball harder, and we lost. And Jeremy coaches that team. And when it finally broke, and we gave the kids get their second place medals, a lot of those kids took those second place medals and they were like, I don't want this. And Jeremy and I were both very emotional, because I think we saw like we're so close, like we're so close. And I don't have a problem with those kids being upset that they lost in that setting, because I think they knew that their work should have resulted in a win. right? And the other team was better than us in that day. You know, they executed better than we did. And like, hey, man, that's how it breaks down. But I also think in the back of my mind that like those kids understand now that like we're on a path. We're on a very different path than the team that we lost to, because our stuff is going to help us accelerate our curve over the next 4 years. You know, these kids are coming in and they're playing their first high school baseball this year. I'm aware that some of them are not going to play all these next 4 years with us. I think some of those kids are just naturally going to go like, hey, I'm passionate about something else. And that's fine. Like, that's totally fine. But it comes back to, okay, what am I imparting them with in the time that I have them for? And I just want to impart them with this sense of like ownership that like, if you want to get better at something, you have to work hard, and then you are going to reap those benefits. It might not be today, you know? And again, you might be Tony Hawk. You might fail over and over and over and over and find yourself laying on the ground wondering at age like 48, like, why am I even doing this? You know,
Yeah.
like, why am I doing this? I'm trying to get to a place where I can bench 315. Finally, I graduated high school at like 155 pounds. Increasing my bench and finally be able to hit 6 plates has literally been something that I've been working on and off since my daughter was born. And my daughter's going to be 17 in December. I've had a lot of failure over that period of time. And like, it's getting close.
Yeah.
And I just want these kids to kind of use our game to be a conduit, to have that perspective. I will fail as long as it takes to get to where I want to go. And to cultivate that sense of perseverance, to cultivate that sense of like resilience is something that our game is uniquely qualified to teach. You know, when you fail in our game, the spotlight is really public. It's like it's pitcher and batter, right? And somebody's going to fail. And like, you know, kids play youth soccer and like you can be on the field of like 10 other kids. Your team scores a goal. You didn't touch it. Hey, like we participated in that, right? Yep. Baseball is different. And I think the way that we embrace that is you recognize that as a conduit to teach a kid that like you can publicly fail, but if you take something from that and you learn from that, and it informs your approach, it informs your understanding of what you need, it informs your understanding of what you need to learn, that's like a long-term win, right? This is like I think it's like a Kobe Bryant quote, right? I never win, I learn. I'm sorry, I never lose. If I don't win, I learn.
Yep.
This every single weekend world-ending championship thing that we've constructed for kids from like 6U to 13U, that's a very different signal. And I am terrified about what our games are going to look like 10 years from now because of it. And that's, you know, the reason we've got a new book coming out, the reason we do the podcast, we're running teams is because I want to fix that. And, you know, I'm happy to be the only one doing it the way that we do it, to be, you know, the zebra in a field of horses, because I'm pretty convicted that like in the long term, we are going to win. I just want to win at a period of time where it actually means something.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think you guys are doing a great job. I think I appreciate it as a baseball player, a coach, and as a dad. You know, I definitely just wish there was more people doing the same thing. Because like I said, I don't want I'm very scared that youth baseball, where we've just been going in the cycle and it's only gotten worse. And I don't want it to keep going down that slide. Something's definitely got to change, because tournaments are only going up in price and they're going down in value.
Yep.
You know, it's getting more and more watered down. It's just a glorified little league that you have to pay 100 times the amount. And I don't want that for my kids, where it's almost, you know, not being on a team and just playing, you know, by yourself is almost more beneficial than some of these teams. But I definitely
conversation, you know, like the way that rec baseball is right now is I think largely not a good place. And the more that those recreational baseball leagues suffer, the more that parents like us look at those leagues and go, well, that's not good enough for my kid. So then I just pull my kid out, right? Like, my wonderful wife, if you want to talk about how big of a gamer my wife is. We went out on a Saturday night last weekend. We're driving around looking for some place to eat, and we like ended up spending like 10 minutes like looking at this old deserted baseball field on a Saturday night in the rain. She's a gamer. She's a gamer. So we're at this field, and it had been constructed in the early 80s, and there's a plaque on the side of the field about like this bond measure that they got passed in like 75 to get it built. And so it's got the names of all the people that participated in it and building design, getting the bond measure done, etc. And at the bottom of it, it says, it's like, appreciate what it took for us to get here, keep it wisely, and use it for as long, use it for generations, right? Like, we invested in this thing. The field is decrepit now. It's fallen apart. And we ended up looking it up online, and the league didn't even have a season last year.
Oh, wow.
Some of those parents are going to go, all right, well now I just have to start my own club ball team, right? I can't trust rec baseball is going to serve my needs, so I'm going to start this. I'm going to start a club ball team. But now again, you're putting a parent, a mom or a dad that doesn't have enough training, that doesn't understand what the objective of this thing is, in a mechanism where like, well, now I have to take checks from other parents. How do I honor those parents? Well, I guess we got to win. Yep. Right. I guess we got to win. So I think we really need a pretty significant realignment in youth baseball. And that's the thing that I'm going to keep pushing for, because I think
you are in that situation and you feel that way, I strongly suggest you go invest into your course. I honestly, I mean that. I truly mean that.
I appreciate you, man.
I remember I was working at a job I had, and I had it on my ears as I'm doing it. I'm like, man, it was beneficial for me, someone that played pro ball for 10 years,
I appreciate that, man.
And so definitely a parent that wants to get into coaching, definitely, like, you have to, it's just like anything else. You have to educate yourself. And if you want the best for your kids and you do think that you doing it yourself is the best route, I just strongly suggest going about it the right way, and not just going about it to win, but understand that you have an impact on these kids' lives forever.
Yeah.
And beyond baseball. It like we've been talking about this whole time, we want to impact kids beyond baseball and allow them to teach them to have values and not just focus on the end result. Because then if you don't have values, what stops you from cheating and taking steroids to get there? Because if it's just about the end result, then it doesn't matter putting in the work. And
again, some of these messages are already being compounded in this environment we've constructed. Like, dip your toe in the world of rolled bats at the youth level. That's a real thing. That is a real thing. People are buying these $300 to $500 bats and then sending them off to some customizer to help them increase performance even more artificially than they are now.
Yep.
Like, why? Why is a parent compelled to spend that money to do something that literally violates the law or the rules in so much as it matters? Because they want to win.
Yep.
The signal is screwed up. So yeah, the reason that I entrust Jeremy to run our academy so that I can focus on stuff like this, doing podcasts, writing the new book that's coming out, doing the new certification, pushing this message, because we need parents are both our greatest leverage and also our greatest downfall if they're not trained appropriately. So I think there's some big signal stuff that we're trying to fix there.
Well, thank you so much for your time, dude. We've been on here an hour and a half now. I know you got other things to do, but I really appreciate you taking your time out of your busy schedule. If anyone wants to follow you, you talked about the podcast. How do they find you?
Yeah, so Driveline Academy podcast, the world's most dangerous youth baseball podcast, is available everywhere you get podcasts: Spotify, Apple, Google, iHeart, literally everywhere. So Driveline Academy podcast, you can find us. We broadcast every single week. You can follow all of our the Academy social is Driveline Youth, basically everywhere. So Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. You can find me talking frequently. It's Deven Morgan on Twitter with 2 E's. Yeah, man, like, just and we got a ton of free stuff out there too, right? Like we have a new book coming out. The cert is already there. We just revised our youth kits, so those are a lot cheaper. But we also have free stuff. Like I literally just redid our free individual training program PDF. It's like 40 pages. Some of the stuff you're going to do in there is going to require some equipment. Some of it, I think you can just go get it, and it's going to help your perspective change. Like I'm aware that, like, again, I don't want to gate this stuff behind money, because I think for a lot of people, it's just easy for us to just put something like that for free, whether that's my content, whether that's a podcast, whether that's a free program, and just learn a little bit about what we're trying to do and why. Like the reason we train with all this data and technology is I want to understand this thing at the deepest level that I possibly can. I've dedicated basically my entire life to this. It's largely all I care about other than my wife and children. And I just want more parents to understand that, like, look, I was a bad youth baseball coach. I've got footage on my phone that literally gives me like the heebie-jeebies when I re-listen to it when I was coaching my kids back in the day. And I exemplified basically everything that I say that you shouldn't do now. I was that guy. I realized at a certain point that the relationships that I was creating with my own children were being negatively affected, and I had to change and I had to get better. So like, look, man, I've put 12 or 13 years into this. You can do the Youth Baseball Dev certification and learn all that stuff in the course of a weekend. Or you can get the free program, read that thing, take you a couple minutes. Like, yeah, we're just trying to help.
And I know from my experience, the value for the price, like, you can't go wrong with it. What is the price on
it? Youth Baseball Dev Cert is like $149. And
the information you're going to get from that is worth way more than that. That is definitely a great value.
Yeah, and we've got some changes coming with the new book coming out. We're also going to, I think, hit that at a really aggressive price point relative to value. And then once we finish that, I'm going to be out there trying to do coaching conferences. I mean, I just created an itinerary of like 25 cities I might be trying to hit between January and July.
Awesome.
We're going to be getting out there, man. We're going to be talking about it. You can find me at ABCA. If anybody's going to the ABCA coaching conference, I'll be there. There's a decent likelihood that we do this like big coaching conference book tour thing, and in which case I will be in a major city, come to you, and we'll figure out a way to get people there, and we'll try to continue to push the message about the value of, I think, changing your perspective on youth baseball.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time. Next time you're in Phoenix, hit me up. We'll grab some food.
Oh, yeah. That's a done deal. Absolutely.
All right. Thank you so much, Deven.
Yep. No problem, brother.